Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are this moment. I am your host, Maria Magdalena Campos Pons, Cornelio Vanderbilt Endowed Chair Professor of Fine Arts, and the founder of EADJ. EADJ is a trans-institutional organization between the Fritz Museum, the Fisk University, Million of Conversations, and Vanderbilt University. I am reaching you out from the grounds of Vanderbilt University, ancient land of the Cherokee, Chivani, and others Native Americans. Also, receiving ground of the effort and labor of ancestral lines of Africans brought to this country. From this land and from this site, we appreciate you join us through this entire semester. And today, Wednesday, November 18, 2020, being our last episode for the Engine for Our Democracy and Justice. We continue today with the topic of love transmutation. As we engage ourselves and launch ourselves in what I hope will be an important conversation in this topic, I want to quote briefly the work of the great American writer Bell Hooks and her seminal book, All About Love. This book was brought to my attention late in 1998 when I was finishing a piece for the Museum of Modern Art, Spoken Softly with Mama. And in that quote, she says something about our relation with the definition and approximation to love. The practice of love offers no place of safety. We risk loss, hurt, pain. We risk being acted upon by forces outside our control. In reflecting in that quote, I think we offer to our opportunity to reinvent, our opportunity to redeem, our opportunity to, in many ways, construct out of ruins, construct out of despair, construct out of being surrounded by negative forces and being conflicted in the delivery of truth. EADJ itself has been, and it is, an attempt to build through love, an attempt to launch a set of ideas, actions that allow for us and everything and everywhere that we care for to find better opportunity and more clear path to our future. When I think of love's transmutation and all of implication of transformative power of love, I would think that is in the core that define what EADJ is all about. It is important to say that both the beauty, the enchanting aspect of love beyond sentimentality, it always depends on collective forces. We do not love alone. We do not fall out of love alone. It is always in the present and in finding in others actions, people, place, a continuum. So I hope that you guys all, our lawyer followers, and the news to this conversation today, stay with us for the next hour of discussion with some fundamental, fantastic thinkers about love transmutation. I pass the words now to program curator Marina Fokiri. Thank you.
Thank you, Magda, very much. It's hard to continue and to pick the microphone for one of the best advocates of love I could imagine, Magda Campos Pons, the dreamer and founder behind Engine of Our Democracy and Justice. Thank you very much. My immense gratitude, Magda, for making us part of your vision and for giving us the chance to walk with you along this path, gratifying and challenging path that brings us here together today. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everyone and everywhere in the world that you are following us right now. It's a big honor for me to be part of this family of our democracy and justice. And I'm truly grateful to the team and the huge efforts and our amazing collaboration. Above all, I'm grateful to our participating guests, speakers, respondents, moderators, friends, whose knowledge and practice have been informing us for a long time now, besides the time frame of the webinar, and has been influencing us and inspiring us for these programs and others endeavors to come. Today, indeed, is the final chapter of this circle of our program. There has been 3 months in which we meet every Wednesday, discussing how to live together, how to be in common in the precarious Souths while maintaining our polyphony, reflecting on the restoration of democracy and justice, and sharing intensities while coexisting in the cloud as this time of pandemic dictates. We have no other alternative. Yet, within these 3 months, we have been learning from Accra, Berlin, Boston, Belgium, Cameroon, Chicago, Guatemala, Ithaca, Johannesburg, Lima, Melbourne, New York, Paris, Sudan, Athens, and of course, Nashville, all in close coexistence. Love indeed is an action and not just a feeling. And this is what our common efforts means here today. Even if these sober times of fragmentation demand the opposite, is in love where we can resist, thrive, and lead under any circumstance, to follow on the words of Bell Hooks, which indeed has written about love extensively and in great words. With no further ado, I would like to allow the floor to our moderator of today, the CEO and Executive Director of Frest Museum, Susan Edwards, to lead this panel. With much love to Susan. Thank you.
Thank you both to Marina and to Magda and for the summation of what we've been doing for the last 3 months. So I won't repeat that except to express the gratitude of all of us who've been involved with this since its inception, and to thank everyone in front of the camera and behind. Now, today we consider how performance art and conversation can help us come to grips with the past, heal, and move forward to reform ourselves, our institutions, and our political systems to establish a more just and equitable world. Our panelists consider the emotional and social cost of oppression, white supremacy, and patriarchy. By examining the flaws we have inherited and perpetuate, we can devise pathways to reciprocity and reconciliation as individuals and as nations. Each speaker will take about 15 minutes, which will leave us plenty of time for Q&A. So please put your questions in. We'll try to get to all of them. And it's my pleasure to introduce our distinguished panel, some of whom you know in the past. So I may be a little bit redundant, but they're all worthy of this introduction. They're all affiliated with Vanderbilt University. And I begin with Maria Magdalena Campos Pons, who is Professor of Fine Arts, Cornelius Vanderbilt Endowed Chair of Fine Arts, Drawing, Performance, and Installation. She is a Cuban native with Nigerian, Hispanic, and Chinese roots. Her multinational heritage is evident in her artistic practice, which combines photography, performance, painting, sculpture, film, and video. Her poetic and haunting work investigates history, memory, gender, identity, personal experience, excuse me, and religion. Professor Campos Pons has had solo exhibitions at the Museum of Modern Art, New York, Indianapolis Museum of Art, excuse me, Peabody Essex Museum, the National Gallery of Canada, and the First Art Museum. She has given solo performances at the Guggenheim in New York and the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. She has participated in biennials and triennials across the globe, as well as Documenta and Prospect 4. Her art is in the permanent collections of over 30 of the world's most distinguished museums. The engine for art, democracy, and justice is the product of her imagination, inspiration, dedication, and perspiration. And we are the grateful beneficiaries of her energy, passion, and relentless commitment to the healing power of love. T.S. Harvey is Associate Professor of Anthropology, Director of Graduate Studies for Global Public Health, Environmental Protection, and doctor-patient communication. With training in medical and linguistic anthropology, Dr. Harvey's research and interests focus on expanding scientific partnerships, developing innovative technologies, and building local capacities to tackle global public health and environmental challenges, especially those impacting vulnerable populations, health disparities, disease, risk, environmental degradation, water sanitation, and infrastructure. Among his many accomplishments, and importantly for survival today, Harvey formed the team that created a virtual self-screening tool that will help individuals access their risk of being infected with COVID-19. The app also offers capabilities for expediting test screening for providers and ultimately giving public health officials real-time data to identify, map, and target interventions where they're needed most. He also launched the Spanish version of the COVID-19 virtual self-screening tool. He is widely published in the leading journals for the study of anthropology, medicine, psychiatry, and public health. Somehow, in this demanding academic life, Professor Harvey finds time to write poetry. Ted Fisher, or Edward Fisher, is the Cornelius Vanderbilt Professor of Anthropology, Professor of Management at Owen School, Professor of Health Policy, Professor of Radiology at the School of Medicine, and Director of Center of Latin American Studies, all at Vanderbilt. He also directs the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation project in collaboration with the World Health Organization, Europe, on cultural context for health and well-being. In 2009, Dr. Fisher founded Manny Plus, an award-winning social enterprise in Guatemala that develops and produces locally sourced foods to fight malnutrition. And he currently serves on the board of the Maya Education Foundation. Manny Plus has awarded Professor Fisher their Alterna Prize for Social Entrepreneurship and the Viva Schnibbenny, Prize for Social Innovation. His research focuses on issues of political economy, values, well-being, and development. He has authored or edited numerous books, including most recently, The Good Life, Aspiration, Dignity, and the Anthropology of Well-Being. Professor Fisher is currently completing a book that examines the way cultural and economic values are intertwined with high-end coffee market. And Summer Ali is adjunct professor of law at Vanderbilt University. She assists international businesses and individuals with cross-border investments, transactions, immigration, and compliance. She helps clients reach their strategic goals amidst the intersection of national security and economic development. Summer's career has taken her across the globe through her work at the White House, the South African Supreme Court, the state of Tennessee, and as an attorney. Professor Ali is a young global leader with the World Economic Forum and a team member of the Council of Foreign Relations. Working at the intersection of civil rights, national security, and economic development, Ali served as a White House Fellow in the Obama administration, as an Assistant Commissioner of Internal Affairs in Tennessee Governor Haslam's administration. Ali is currently working on a memoir, From the Holy Land to the Heartland, Olives and Sweet Tea, about one family's century-long quest for peace through belonging. She maintains her law practice through Bass, Berry & Sims here in Nashville, and is a commissioner on the Nashville Human Relations Commission. In 2018, Ali received the White House Fellows Impact Award that recognizes recent White House Fellows who have demonstrated remarkable achievement and transformative contributions in their field. And so now it is my pleasure to turn this over to our first speaker, Magda Campos-Pons.
Thank you, Susan. How wonderful to hear again the company of everyone that this conversation take place. When I started thinking about EADJ, really, perhaps the first topic that was in my mind was love. And love transmutation come out, as I spoke in the last episode, after a visit in Italy, in the very bottom of Italy, when I have the opportunity to see a transhumance, which is a kind of a very ritualistic path of energy between nature. And from observing that in nature, I start thinking about the transmutation of love in us human. I cannot imagine a most fundamental topic to try to heal and to try to find ways to resolve difference and to resolve conflicts and to resolve what is observed as difference. I am thinking in my brief intervention today, to just talk about love as we care for others and as we find relation to others. Love transmutation as we found ourselves moving in geography and perhaps in the context of the exile. And then love when we are hurting, but it's not the hurt of just our loss, but hurting by others. And love that repair, the love that is able to build out of ruins. So I'm going to ask Megan to place the very first image for my presentation. This is a piece from early 2000s. Is in the collection of a private gallerist, and another collection is an edition of two. But what I wanted to say fundamentally about this piece, that it tried to construct visually through art a symbol for home. I use a shape of age. And in my interesting with the language, I was trying to find out how could I talk about being at home, whatever I want, whatever I was. And home, house, hogar in Spanish, this age shape. And I call the piece replenishing. There is a story that I want to construct around showing that piece to you guys all today. We talk about what I think about caring for others and see ourselves in the potentiality of love transmutation and love transformation in the image of others. The collector that owned that piece, which I'm going to mention, I don't know if she's listening. I don't expect necessarily, is Bernice Steinbaum. Bernice Steinbaum is my first dealer and my outstanding and still dealer, art gallerist in Miami. When Bernice Steinbaum saw this piece, she's a petite Jewish woman, called me and said to me, "This is not your mother. That is my mother. I want this piece." The only reason that I made this story to you all today, because Bernice Steinbaum and I couldn't be more different ladies, or I suppose the mother of Bernice Steinbaum and my mother. But the fact that the power of the image, of what through the construction of symbol, through visuality, could bring as a link, as a stencil life, as this note that is putting together these two women in that frame. There is a other body, this another woman with that other story, with that other beginning and development, that could see herself reflected in it, to the point to reclaiming and declared, "This is me and my mother." I cannot mention to you the importance for an artist, a maker of symbol, a making of illusory realities. As a matter of fact, I feel myself attached to my mother, to that umbilical cord of African beads, every day of my life, every minute of my life, and everything that I do. And in some way, I dream at some point that I wanted to make that piece too, not only about myself, but many women around the planet, what I see with a connection to the land, but also the connection to ancestry and connection to time. There is a story about my mother with white hair and myself in that image with this black hair. Now I am becoming my mother a little by a little. I will be able to do another picture with an adopted daughter in the future, and this replenishing, this continuum of energy. So when I did this piece, I was not using exactly the word love transmutation, but the piece itself was carry on the potentiality for what is going to become later, love transmutation in my own interpretation, without the nurturing, without the energy, without the grounding, moral, philosophical, religiously, physical, of what that women mean in my life, this conversation will not be happening. So I wanted to start with not only honoring my mother, who was a force of transforming life, the first feminist that I ever remember met. No theory, no education in the philosophy of feminism, just a feminist by action. Like Hook Bell say, love is action. I learned that from this woman. And I am so pleased and so moved that other women, such as the incredible Bernice Steinbaum, saw herself in that image. And I'm going to put a quote. Bernice Steinbaum was one of the first gallerists that in the American soil opened her doors to Black women to exhibit in New York in a time when no many doors were open for Black women to have a space, an exhibition. Faye Ringgold was one of her beneficiaries, or her love, transformation, and care for others. Next image, Megan. So here I think of love, transmutation, and in the question, as I announced in the beginning of EADJ and in my words to ground it, what EADJ was going and what was and is. And I was thinking about the position of the body in topography. No, I say in my open words that the epitome and the culmination of human right ends in the body itself as topography. And then the negotiation of site, the negotiation of place, the negotiation of land. And these two pieces are for me seminals in some way. Love narrative too always, I think, come from the recognition of Are we able to engage? Are we able to embrace? Are we able to give in whatever connotation it does? And I believe that, at least in my own experience of receiving, expanding, and spreading love, the question of locality, site, being in a particular place has been very important. What about living in United States, my adopted home, a land that I love, but dreaming of an island, dreaming of the place that I was born, dreaming of Cuba, but in actual, in the horizon that I dream of, not being able to see anymore the landscape of Cuba. Another landscape is built. So I am struggling, and I am thinking here about love, transmutation, and the meaning of geography, the meaning of sitting, the meaning of where we are, what we see, what is in front. Or finally, before my pedaling back to the south and spending so many years really, as I feel in that particular piece, in a rough, in a way, stranding in the middle of the blizzard, taking comfort, refuging myself in the imaginary vitamin D of the orange sun. There was some weight and somehow too distance, and really structuring a place of comfort and understanding and peace with the new land. So these two pieces for me are the epitomes of, or marking of, my own struggle with the transmutation of love, the changes, the continuum, the disparity, the 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 reinvention. And our history itself is full of this example. In those two pieces too are a testimony of my own love with modernity and my own love with the history of both painting and photography. But also I was thinking in this piece too, I was in love with Matisse. I was looking all about his, paper cutting and a sketch, but also making it in this moment of when a dread of a black woman become a network of possibilities. She could be dreaming in the bottom of the ocean of finding refugee in the middle of a blizzard and creating an absolutely paradise out of difference. So I want to go to the next image. And in the next image is not an image, it's actually a sound piece. And it's what I am thinking about, the core, the core of ethics and a moral compass and commitment when we love. And when we love justice, and when we love what is right, and then silent required that we spoke out one way or another what come to my mind, our minds. I made this piece a few days after the events of the execution, the public execution of George Floyd, and I let you listen. You see the Mississippi River snailing down toward the Gulf. Sometimes the water's mood is calm, but there comes the occasion in which the pounding rain expands the river basin. It reaches out once and reaches out twice and reaches out thrice and reaches out 4 and reaches out 5 and reaches out 6 and trying to rearrange its path at 7 and reaches out at 8 and called the mother Nile River Mama, Mama, at 8 minutes and 45 seconds exactly. Heavy stream comes and silent all. Stop reaching out at 9.
It recalls the Amazon, a sister, brother stream, and take another ridge at 10 and pushing it out a last 11 times. The final gasp. The rivers looks calm, just in the surface. Below is a heat gathering steam and pressure, ready to streamline force like a geyser breath. Oshun is keeping her kitchen hot, bracing fire, from where Ogun returns again.
Thank you, Megan. So that was my response to a moment of pain and a need to talk about love. I have a final PowerPoint. I don't know if I have time for that. 5 minutes, so I will use 5 minutes just to talk briefly about Intermittent Rivers, who is a poem in a way to the possibility of love as restorative force for the rebuild out of ruins. The city of Matanza, where I was born, is one of the more beautiful cities in Cuba. I was invited to the Havana Biennale in 2018, and I decided rather than exhibit myself one more time in another Biennale, I wanted to contest that invitation, inviting many artists. You are seeing the San Juan River. Matanza is not only calling the Athens of Cuba, but also the Venice of Cuba. It's the only city in the Caribbean that is crossed by 3 rivers, and they are all majestic. San Juan River is really very close to the center of the center, the plaza in the center of the city. And through the 60 years that I have lived and born, the population of Cuba were not allowed to use the river as a way to engage themselves in leisure time activities, because as you guys know, many people use boats in Cuba to leave the island and come to United States. And this has been a big struggle. And one of my ideas was that I wanted to let the Matanceros see their own city through boats. So this is a performance piece that you're seeing here, by one of the Matanzas artists, in which he invited many fishermen to let people from the city join the boats. Here you see a true image of a performance in a hill, and also our own Jana Harper, professor at Vanderbilt, who did a performance in Matanzas, who has been very important for her work and for the presentation that took place there. I'm going to ask Megan to move a little faster so you guys could see the image and I give you a context. This is the promenade beside the river. 3 years ago, this was a dumpster, a place in absolute ruins, full of garbage. It was through this ride of trust, belief, and dream that with the help of the artists of the city, we managed to recover this space. Concern about ecology and concern about the planet, if we go to the back slides, we planted 2 in Matanzas. We started a project planting palm trees because the national tree of Cuba, so common, is still being disappeared. So we started with the group of ecologists from the city of Matanzas, an entire reforestation program in which in the moment of the Biennale, we planted new 13 royal palm. And that was in celebration of the numbers of the Biennale. In that moment, we were doing the 13 Biennale. Those are very small gestures. But underneath of this gesture were incredible aspect of coming back to the city, talking with the citizen, with the students, especially the young people, about what they knew and of the history of literary ecology and in Matanzas. So this is a result of number of conversation, visit, and finally deciding to replanting palm trees on Cuba. The next slide, Megan. This is the promenade, and what you see in the right side is the front side of the river, when we have not yet managed to do any intervention, and you could see the state of ruins is exactly how was this site in which life now is taking place. I am not sure that I am presenting this project with the precision that I wanted to do. I'm going to try to be very effective as possible in a brief time, but fundamentally, I went to Matanzas and invite the artists for a meeting and say, I want to be sure that many of you could participate in restoring the beauty of what our city was, and also to dream of a space for yourself. I invited 3 curators from all around the world. Celine went in Norway, Octavio Saya from Spain and Boston, and Salah Hassan from Cornell and Sudan, to work with me. And we did a selection of artists, not only local, but international. The majority of the international artists who were in Matanzas were dearest friends, people that I have been working in solidarity for many, many, many years, who literally out of love and trust and care for Magda as well as for their own commitment to social justice, say yes. It was absolutely a response of love and trust. Those artists pay for their tickets to go to Cuba, pay for their place to stay in Cuba. It was a generosity from people in the city who fed them and helped them to install and develop the exhibition. The biennial, in the end, was listed as one of the 15 best international exhibitions in that year worldwide, and kind of nicknaming the Biennial of Love. And it was a model that I really want to talk about widely and share with people around the world, because it is imprinted by an energy that I have no experience in any other biennale before. I will say that perhaps in Documenta, where I really experienced a level of solidarity and engagement in a dimension that is not necessarily present in many other biennale. This was not about artists competing, of artists ego first. This was about together how we could dream something else, and it happens. So Megan, if you could go passing a little faster.
Can we, okay, just kind of running over here a little bit, Magda.
Yeah, and we should go. So this image are all different moment of the Biennale itself. And I want to go to the image in which we are. Here is our own Mark Scala from the Fritz, and Jeffrey Hayes from Chicago, Rebecca Urshield. And this final image is the before and after. In the top right, you see the space in already clean, but in this repair. In the bottom, how they have been fixed only by artist recycling. And in the left is Olu Ogibe, who was invited to work in a fabric for metal and used the residual and ended doing some of the most beautiful post-minimalist sculptural project of the last few years. So it's a really, I am extremely proud of this project, and I see this project as a model for the future. This is my my little adding to the conversation of love transmutation this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Magda, so much. I told you, poetic and haunting. So thank you so much. You never disappoint. So Professor Harvey, would love to hear from you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Professor T.S. Harvey. I just want to thank Maria Magdalena Campos Pons, Susan Edwards, Marina Fokides, Ted Fisher, and Samar Ali, as well as everyone else who's listening to this in the morning, the afternoon, or the evening. I'm not going to be long. When I was given this topic, and I'm honored, I should say, honored and humbled to be able to participate today, perhaps even more humbled having to follow Maria, but I'll do the best I can. when I was given this topic, love and transmutation, I must admit that anthropologists are not particularly focused on love, although they should be. But then what I did was I attempted to reach back onto the foundation of anthropology and to think of anthropology as growing out of this complex intersection, these tributaries of art and science. And from that, I hope I've found some sort of craft, some sort of boat to kind of carry us through this process. So as I think specifically about episode 8, Engine for Art, Democracy, and Justice, I want to focus in specifically on one particular aspect of this. So if we think about the viral pandemic in terms of connectivity, I like to think specifically about the connectivity piece and the internal vulnerability piece that manifests itself externally. And I want to take this quite literally. And what I could think about as I was trying to pull this together, and if I'm honest, I will say that I struggled. What came to mind over and over again as I began to try to struggle with this, to write about this, was one word, almost as a haunting refrain. It came over and over and over again. And I am in no doubt that this is a product of the times that we're living in, times of uncertainty, times of insecurity, times of vulnerability. The word that came to mind was broken. Over and over again, everything I wrote, I kept coming up with the same thing, broken. So I want to take that theme and to try to explore it through anthropology as best I can. But I want to begin by asking everyone who has graciously joined us today and those who will view this in the future to ask of themselves a question. And that question is, what do you do when something that you care about breaks? I think this is an important moment to talk about this. And this takes me to the notion and to this idea of transformation, even transfiguration. It's broken. What do we do? You can't put something back together unless you have a plan. So what I want to do is to talk a little bit about anthropology and to talk a little bit about this plan and where perhaps anthropology leaves us and where we can go beyond that. So each of us are in a perpetual process of reconstruction, a process that is highlighted, that is amplified by the current crisis of COVID-19 and all of the loss and suffering that is around us and a part of our daily lives. There is no doubt a lot here to consider. So I'd like to start with an anthropological approach. Now, I'll say that I'm a medical and linguistic anthropologist, but I'm trained in the 4 fields. So my colleagues in archaeology will forgive me for entering into an area that is not my specialization, but I want to talk specifically about archaeologists and how archaeologists approach broken pottery and use this idea of broken pottery and broken ceramics as a metaphor. So most pottery that archaeologists uncover come up from their dark resting places looking like a 3-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. That is, these pieces look like something, and in most cases, many things have happened to them. Yet strangely enough, one Western cultural approach, one might even say compulsion, is to try to reconstruct broken things of value with an aesthetic that seeks to approximate their former selves, their former beauty. That is, our cultural urge is to put things back together so that they look as they did, so that they resemble what they were, not only for ourselves, but also for others who might look upon them in the future. Assuming for a moment that that is desirable, and that is a huge assumption, and further, presuming that this is indeed a healthy exercise, and it may not be, how then do we turn fragmented remains, broken bits and pieces of buried lives into pristine looking museum displays? Before we consider some of the methods of reconstruction common in anthropology, we might do well to consider the long-term goal of such an endeavor in the first place. Is our goal, is your goal in reconstructing broken things of value to produce museum pieces? to produce things that are nice to look at, to produce things that can be put on display, to produce things that look like they were never broken. A semblance, a resemblance of wholeness. As any of my colleagues in archaeology will tell you, and as Susan knows well, if you take a close look, a critical look at museum pottery, what you will notice is that many, if not most, of the ceramics on public display are often actually bits and pieces, a patchwork of old and new materials, as well as old and new methods, coming together to present the appearance of wholeness, the intimation of wholeness. So in times such as these, times where so many things seem broken, broken democracies, broken economies, broken bodies, broken hopes, broken healthcare, broken lives, broken dreams, broken friendships. How do we move from so many broken pieces in so many places to some semblance of wholeness? The answer, it seems to me, depends largely on what we want and what we expect of the final product. Do we want a museum piece? Again, borrowing from anthropology and taking ceramics as our metaphor, the transformation and indeed transmutation of bits and pieces, of shreds, shards, and patches occurs through meticulous processes under the trained and steady hand of conservation and reconstruction. If what we are seeking to reassemble were pottery, we would know what to do. We would carefully examine and identify the pieces, clean, dry, and organize them. From there, we would likely move to a trial run of bonding using some sort of tape, an initial application of adhesive. After bonding was complete, we would move on to reinforcing, filling, retouching, and hopefully arrive at some semblance, some resemblance of wholeness. But why? Why this urge to make broken things appear as if they were not? If we are broken, perhaps we should look like we were broken. The metaphor of recovery is a powerful one. It invokes and involves picking up the pieces, gathering, collecting, sorting. Yet, there are other ways to approach broken things. What if our hands are no longer steady? What if we are weak? What if we are weary? What if we are broken? But bodies, hopes, healthcare, lives, friendships, dreams, democracy, and economies are not pottery. Yet, there may still be something that we can learn from reconstructing pottery that we can carry over into our lives. For this, we look to East Asia, to Japan in particular, to the tradition of kintsugi, or golden joinery, or golden repair. It is a Japanese art form of repairing broken pottery by joining the pieces together with lacquer mixed with gold, silver, or platinum. The philosophy, the beautiful philosophy guiding this art is to treat the broken pieces as, and the breakages and the imperfections and the flaws, as well as the repairs and those who make the repairs, as a part of the history of the object. Something to be celebrated, not to be disguised, not to be hidden, not to be ashamed of. Through this powerful perspective, we are encouraged to see value in our brokenness, in our marks of wear, in our imperfections. And more than that, find and see and imagine utility for ourselves and others beyond our broken places. Following the inspiration of kintsugi, we can put pottery and lives back together, not by hiding, but by commemorating our cracks and celebrating our imperfections and our lives beyond the breaks. And I said this to my two children, 4 years old and 8, and I thought I did a good job. And my oldest son turned to me and he said, "But Daddy, Where do we get the gold? Where do we get the gold to put the pottery back together? I paused for a moment and I said, son, it's love. That's what it is. There is an infinite supply. It is our most precious asset. Hemingway was right. Hemingway wrote, the world breaks everyone, and afterwards, many are strong at the broken places. Yes, it is true. I am, we are not what we once were, but we are also not what we can yet become. While there still is light, while there still is strength, while there still is love, we can be otherwise. We can be whole. We can be more beautiful. We can be better. And the answer is love. I thank you for that.
How incredibly beautiful. Thank you so much for that extremely poetic few minutes with us. Really a master of metaphor, and maybe someone who really reaches into my soul. It's easy to say. Thank you so much. And now we will hear from Dr. Fisher. Ted, are you ready?
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Wow, that's I feel inspired and empowered to be my broken self here in front of everyone. That was beautiful. I need some more gold. Love transmutation. I was a little hesitant when Magda asked me to participate in a panel on love, although I have to say, my first professional paper was an article looking at romantic love across cultures. I, like TS, am an anthropologist, and it was a very anthropological enterprise because we as anthropologists look at what makes us human, what we share as human beings, but also what makes us different, what's different across cultures, what's different across different societies. My wife thinks it's hilarious that I'm still considered to this day something of an expert on romantic love, an illustration that the scientific study need not translate into everyday practice. As a social scientist, as an anthropologist, I have been thinking a lot about COVID and doing a lot of this thinking actually with TS and others on the call here. And it seems that this COVID crisis has accelerated a lot of changes that were already happening in our society. It has brought inequities into stark relief, and TS's comments about broken and so many things that have been broken. We see this every day in our headlines and the term of the year, doom scrolling. It's also brought us a number of stories of hope and of inspiration, of people coming together, even unlikely communities coming together. I was reading recently about gangs in the favelas of Rio. In the absence of governments taking any sort of public health measures, these narco gangs have imposed their own lockdowns, have imposed their own social distancing methods. And so this crisis, while it has accelerated and exacerbated and magnified lots of the fissures in society, it's also shown us these moments of hope, of people coming together in different kinds of ways. And in this, it seems to me that this crisis is as much about values as it is about anything. A crisis, we often say that a crisis shows one's character, right? An individual crisis. And collectively, it does that as well. A crisis sort of reveals what's important to us as a society, as a nation, as a community. And a lot of the talk around the COVID crisis has been around these really first question, what is essential? What is liberty or freedom? What is solidarity? And so I think in many ways, this COVID crisis is about a lot more than a virus. It is not a coincidence that the Black Lives Matter movement has also accelerated in this moment. I read recently a historian saying that there are moments in history that are plastic moments. It makes me think of the plastic arts, TS, when you're in the pottery. That there are these plastic moments, and we are certainly in one of these moments where things are on the table that have not been on the table in my lifetime. The opportunity to change things for better and the potential to change things for worse is on the table. In my mind, the COVID crisis also reveals the error of segregating domains of life and fields of study that we have done for several hundred years. This is in many ways the Enlightenment project, that we have biology and psychology and economics and politics and anthropology and art and poetry and literature, and never should these domains meet, right? We're all masters of our own domain. And yet this sort of crisis shows us the error of segregating things very dramatically in this way. The COVID crisis, I mean, the fact of the matter is that it doesn't emerge just from this SARS-CoV-2 virus, this thing that we can look at under a microscope. The effects that we feel in the COVID pandemic are cultural and social. They result from political decisions. This is a humanistic phenomenon. This is a human phenomenon, and thus a humanistic phenomenon. The virus of COVID itself, the virus, like any virus, is not alive. It doesn't have a metabolism. It is inert. It cannot attack us, despite our language to the contrary, that this is a foreign invader that we are going to stamp out. Rather, we pass this virus along. We give it life through our own bodies. And we pass it along through our social networks, through our cultural pathways, through our ways of making a living and our livelihoods. Literally, we pass it along through the common air that we breathe. And so we cannot understand the current crisis that we're in by looking through a microscope or sequencing a genome. The lab science is absolutely necessary, and I, like everyone here, I think is hopeful for a vaccine. And this is important work, but there's not a silver bullet. There's not an easy solution to the problems that this crisis has highlighted and exacerbated. We can't just vaccinate everyone and get back to normal. Normal, and this is something that TS has brought up. I'm stealing a line from you here, TS. Normal is what got us here. And so when we talk about recovery and recovering what we had, we can't just vaccinate everybody and go back to the way things were, because that's going to make us just as vulnerable as we were. It's going to put us in this position that got us here in the first place. And segregating and isolating these parts of the human experience, seeing them as independent and isolated, this is also part of what got us here. And the COVID crisis isn't the only one. The environmental crisis, which we are facing at this moment as well, shows us that things are interrelated. The environment is not apart from economics. It's not apart from our personal choices. It's not apart from political decisions. The line that one often hears, I recently heard this when one of my superiors in the university gave me some bad news, and he said, you know, it's not personal, it's just business. I'm like, that's not right. That's not actually true. If you're doing something that impacts my life, that impacts my livelihood, that impacts the way in which I live, that's personal for me. It may be business too, but it's also personal. And the idea that that what the arts bring to the table in times like this, that's a nice sentiment, but it's not science. You know, we need to talk to the scientist and not the artist at this moment. But actually, we need art now more than ever. The individualism of the market, the individualism that we place so much value on in this society, people picking themselves up by the bootstraps and all of these metaphors that we have. This is insufficient to combat a virus. It's insufficient. We need coordinated action. We need social solidarity. We need to envision a shared future, to borrow some of your language, Summer. A lot of what anthropologists do, by the way, is just steal good ideas from other people, and I'm doing that in full force today. But what about if our self-interest, if we re-envision what our self-interest is? What about if our self was not just this autonomous physical body that we inhabit? What about if my self-interest included my family? What if my self-interest included my community? What if my self-interest included my nation? That gives us a very different perspective on pursuing our self-interest. Magda had suggested that I say something about reciprocity and cooperation, which is something that I've written about. And in lots of studies, I mean, we've taken the economic rule of thumb that we're all fundamentally self-interested and just sort of writ that at large in society, I feel like. When we are fundamentally cooperative, we are fundamentally loving as well. We fundamentally depend on reciprocity and that back and forth that gives action to, that gives energy to life. And these sorts of connections and these sorts of intertwinings is what art, and I'm thinking here particularly of your work, Magda, but of others as well, is it much better at capturing. I've been as Susan mentioned, I've been writing a book about coffee lately and writing about all the complex interconnections that go into us drinking a cup of coffee. And it's very hard to capture in words. It's very hard to capture in a linear narrative that goes from one page to the next and one chapter to another. And this is where artistic approaches that are not as bound by that linearity are able to reveal connections that we often can't see. Things are complicated. The world is ambiguous. There are not easy solutions to most of the problems that we're facing. There are very few silver bullets. We tend to like to look for good guys and bad guys and good gals and bad gals. But the fact is that we're all so much more complicated than that. And this is where an artistic approach, an embrace of that complexity and ambiguity can be more revealing than the certitudes or the presumed certitudes of social science. What I think that the artistic perspective can bring to this is bringing unlike things into interaction. What the market does really well, and the economic market does really well, is make unlike things alike. We can reduce everything to a dollar value. We can trade things sight unseen. And yet many things are so fundamentally uncomparable, incommensurate, that forcing them into likeness does a disservice. I was having this conversation with Summer recently that I'm finishing up, that we try and put so many things into economic cost benefit analyses, but how do you judge love? What number do we put on how much you love your child or your partner? What number do we put on social justice? We can't do that. And it requires making a judgment that is apart from economics. So I would like to end by saying, I was talking about the virus, and it's not this foreign invader so much as something that we pass on and is part of us. It's also the only solution to this pandemic is incorporating that other into ourselves. And that can be done through exposure to the virus and being infected and then having immunity. It can be done through a vaccine, because what is a vaccine but producing that within ourselves? So the way out of this problem, to TS's point, is love, is connection. It is incorporating that foreignness into our body, both individually and collectively. And I'll end there.
How beautifully said. Thank you so much. Summer, we're running just a little bit behind, and it's cutting off our time for Q&A, but we certainly have time for you. So we look forward to hearing what you have to tell us. Thank you.
Wow, that's what I have to say. I have to just say, wow, my God, the past hour has been just incredible. And I'm so glad that we're recording this. And I hope that it's played over and over and over again, because I know that we have about 100 people joining us today, and there will be a lot of other people watching this. And I'm so glad, because this is the foundation for what we're going to do this decade. And this is, in my opinion, this is the food that, you know, is feeding the soil. It's the energy that's being put into it, because we have so much work to do. And I know that I don't have much time, so I'm going to cut my remarks so that we really do leave time for Q&A, so that everybody has a chance to address people's questions here. But I just wanted to say, you know, Ted said that he stole my idea, but the truth of the matter is that I stole his idea. I was Ted's student. I had the opportunity to go to Vanderbilt University, and I was really interested in anthropology. And my first class was Anthropology 101 with Ted Fisher. And he introduced the concept of reciprocity in that class. And for me, I grew up bicultural, some would say tricultural. I'm a Palestinian, Syrian, American, Southern Muslim woman. And if there was one thing that I understood, and I grew up in the rural South, if there's one thing that I understood, is that there's a lot of conflict in the world. There's a lot of disagreement. There's a lot of othering. There's a lot of demonization, and there's also a lot of love. And so what do we do with all of these different pieces that really are broken, right? To go to TS's point, and on the floor. What do we do with them? And how do we're constantly working to make our world a better place. We want it to be better. We want humanity to be good. We want peace. We talk about these things. We crave them. How do we get there? And that's in part what inspired me to become a conflict resolutions practitioner, to work at that intersection of national security and economic development and human rights. And I often say, you can't have national security without human rights. You can't have security without civil rights. You have to have civil rights and human rights. And what's at the heart of this? It's reciprocity. And so in Ted's class, he introduced the concept of reciprocity. He asked us, how many people know what reciprocity means? And basically nobody in the class raised their hands. And those who did, didn't get it right. And we then began to talk about it. I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. And one of our essay questions in his class was, describe reciprocity to you. Give us an example of reciprocity in an individual relationship and a communal one. And how does it work systematically? How do you build it into systems? What does that look like? And that is at the heart, really, again, of what we're talking about here. How do you make these systematic shifts from a broken system to a system that works better? It has to have at the heart of it reciprocity. Now, many people say, what is a lawyer doing in this mix, right? I mean, oftentimes we're taught to be very conservative. We're taught to be rigid. It's the law. You know, what is all this art business? And I just want to make this point too. And I began to see the intersection of law, art, justice, and democracy during my time in South Africa. I had the lifetime opportunity of living with the Tutu family and learning from Archbishop Desmond Tutu on the art of truth and reconciliation, from meeting such people and working with such people as Justice Edwin Cameron, who's now just recently retired from the Constitutional Court of South Africa, and later from that experience working with Justice Sachs. And on this art project at the Constitutional Court of South Africa. And together I learned from them that actually law and art truly do go together. And there's an important historical linkage between the law and the arts. The two share important similarities. At their best, art and law can each reflect the aspirations of humankind. Just as a constitutional charter might, an important work of art can provide an important marker of social identity. They are imprints of how a society views itself and also what it hopes to become. These are the aspirations. When we talk about legal norms, when we talk about hope, when we talk about arts, what we're talking about is an aspiration. It is what we are working towards. We are working towards freedom. We are working towards to adhere to human rights. We are working towards liberation. We are working towards these things. And the only way we get there, the only way we for example, protect ourselves from this virus is to work together. And that's also the irony of this COVID-19 phenomenon and situation that we've all found ourselves in. What does it take? It takes solidarity. What does it take? It takes reciprocity. What does it take? It takes respect. Why do we want to wear a mask? Not only to protect ourselves, but to protect each other, to protect the other person who's walking with you in this journey together. And that gets us to this point of this journey. What is this journey that we're on, this boat that we're in, that some moments feels as if it's sinking? So, in moments it's like, throw me a rope. Like I'm known for using analogies here. Are we going off a cliff? And that gets to where do we go from here? And I want to talk about just for a moment values, and then I want to talk about a roadmap to sustainable peace. And then I want to drop one more nugget and then turn it over to Q&A. And that gets us this values piece. So some of you might know my story already. Good guys, bad guys piece. I became when I took the position at the White House, and then later as I took the position in Governor Haslam's administration, I was demonized, I was otherized, I was called the bad guy. People believed that I was this bad person. And I began wondering, like, who's been programming all of this garbage and this nonsense? Like that's stirring up this fear, and that's like tapping into shame too. And these important human emotions, like who's stirring up all this stuff? So I went on another journey to understand, and with focus groups with people who held antagonistic views against me. And I wanted to listen to hear and see what they had to say to see if there was a way forward. And what I found out was that there is a way forward. So that's the very good news. And it's rooted in values. And those values that we share are the following. And I just want to, and this is the lawyer in me too, I just want to give some concrete points here. Sorry, artist in the room. But just to say, one, hard work, okay? This is something that people said that they believed that we share together in our common identity. Two is that the importance and the value of community. Three, honesty, being an honest person. Four, freedom. Okay, so this is this concept of freedom. But the thing is that we get to decide what that is together. And five, family. And at the heart of all of those things is, guess what? Reciprocity. And that brings us to this roadmap to sustainable peace. How do we address this brokenness? And I just wanted to say that it starts with, actually, before we even get to step one, guess what? You have to let love in. You have to love. Because when you begin to open up and start to enter into what we call step one, which is listen, which is why at Millions of Conversations, which our motto is to bring Americans together, we are taking a pledge to listen. And we invite you to take that pledge with us. First step is a pledge to listen. The second step leads to humanity, because when you begin to listen to each other, you start to humanize. And then after that, you begin to empathize. Normally, if you do it right, you begin to empathize. And that leads you then to an exploration of what are our common values? What's rooting us together in this community? How can we build community together? That leads to the fifth step, which is, do we commit to sharing a future together? Do we want to share a future together? That is where you begin to restore agency. And from there, you then move to truth and reconciliation, which is the sixth step in this process, which is very hard and very difficult. And in many ways, it's traumatizing. It has to be done right. And the only reason you should do it is if you've decided you want to move together, you want to move forward together. Because this is really when you embrace that vulnerability. And that's when you do it right, you get to the seventh step, which is sustainable peace. And I just wanted to end on two quick things. And that is to say, I know Kristen Fletchner is listening in on this. And one of the things that Kristen said when she met me in South Africa, and we connected in South Africa actually through Vanderbilt, was that she said, you know who you remind me of? I don't know if you ever took this professor at Vanderbilt, his classes, his name was Professor Fisher. And I said, yeah, of course. And then he introduced me to the great Magdalena Campos Pons. And it comes full circle because here I am with you today. And as I was listening to everybody speak, and I was thinking about this whole transformation concept, and I was writing all these notes from all these different like truth nuggets that people were dropping, I thought to myself, you know what Magdalena is doing? She's transforming MAGA into Magda. Maybe it's Make America. I don't know. You can decide what Magda stands for, but we're going from MAGA to Magda.
Well, I guess if God is love, it could be Dios. So thank you so much. Summer, always impassioned and irrepressible. Who can resist? What a day. Thank you so much. We do have time for some questions, and we have a performance, I think, at 11:30, so we'll move quickly. I guess these are in a certain order, so we'll honor that. So question number 1 is, which ecological factors hold the key to improving public education in underserved communities? And that, I don't know, maybe TS, I'm not sure who has more background in the ecology of helping our planet and improving our public education. Anyone want to take a?
Yeah, I can speak briefly to it. One is, I think, and this is picking up on Samar's comment here, which is a recognition of where we are, which will require, of course, a recognition that we're not all starting in the same place. So the metaphor or the image I like to use is a relay race. We are not actually starting in the same lane. Those lanes are staggered, but unlike a relay race, it's not a circle. So as a result of that, there has to be a recognition that we're not starting in the same place. So we have to be willing to meet people where they are and acknowledge those differences. So in this way, pretending that everyone is equal in terms of access to education or even their starting place is actually a recipe that reproduces inequality. So part of that has to do with a recognition of the inequality that is, and then actually educating and addressing those inequalities in specific communities in order to get to a better place. I think that's one way to think about it.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to respond, or just give us time to go on? I'm interested in, maybe I'll put some of these questions together, because there are questions about the role of creatives in enacting change, but there are also questions about policy making and how do we bring art and law together. And I love what you said about, we're not on the same page, and what are the roadblocks because we're not on the same page? How do we get over those stumbling blocks and turn them into stepping stones? And that's for everyone.
Could I jump in it for a second and say, firstly, what I am totally, see, I would be with a pale skin, I would be very, very red now. I am, with red because the beauty of what you guys have saying, the importance. But I want to say something, summarize something very. As I hear every one of you speaking, I am thinking what we are witnessing this morning is what I would briefly call, quoting my dear friend, Professor Doris Sommer in Harvard University, Renaissance 4. And I back to what Ted was mentioned before and what Harvey mentioned before. We are definitely in a moment of brokenness. So I would say that in English. And that's what I mentioned before, that the focus of intermittent river was repair. We are repairing. I didn't identify the word broken as Harvey did. By the way, I would like to see what Harvey say publishes someplace, because it's just a missing about this broken concept. But we are in need of repair. The only way to move out of a broken situation is find a path to repair. One very close idea about this Renaissance 0.40 is that the first Renaissance, the one that involved Leonardo da Vinci from the point of R, It was a renaissance of this man in his capacity of many bodies, many hats, many things. And then we become illumination, and we change that, and modernity, and we become all wearing one hat and separating ourselves. But when I see the response to repair and the necessity for collective action, love action, according to Bell Hooks, to move forward, is when we do this, what we're doing here, an anthropologist, and a lawyer, a museum director, an artist, an archaeologist, all together trying to find a way forward to repair something. EADJ is a proposition of repairing things that we see in faulty at some point. So I am thinking that from an academic point of view and from an artistic point of view, we are talking about the definition of a space of collaboration, both in the academic field, in the societal field, in the legal field, in the medical field, that we have not reached that yet. And we are in the cusp of acknowledging that. But also, one more important thing, and I am going back to my dear later friend Okwiem Weso, when he understood and saw the global South as a place in which, yes, everything was broken, but everything was put to work again. So what our president today called shithole country is a place with responses that we have not taken into account happen, and let life keep going. Life is moving. People are not dying there in masses. Could I say to you that we are the leading country in there for COVID, but also a cheating country like Cuba has very little number of deaths for real, or Africa? So there are some broken aspects of the places in this conversation of the planetary global South that, in the name of reciprocity, we need to address it from a different corner. We need to enter it from a different perspective. And really, I am thinking we are in the need to rethinking like Leonardo, to say one way, or the people that were in the Tuareg tribe at that moment too, thinking of mathematic solutions and putting together a new model of collective thinking in which an art class, which by the way, EADJ is a seminar, and the students are in the audience this morning, are listening to an anthropologist, a director of the museum, a lawyer, together. I rest my case.
Passionately. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. And I would like to go back to what are the things that are in our way of these collaborations, honest conversations. You know, the other thing that comes to mind is class. And, you know, we're in the kind of academic situation. What about these people who don't feel that they're part of the cultural elite? How do we reach out to them?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different ways. I think that one, it's important to connect at the human level, and that includes around values. I mean, that's at the heart of this. What we're also talking about is building community around value sharing work, and that's done in, as Ted said, there's not a silver bullet. There's not one thing that you do. It's the combination of the things. It also includes the tone of voice that's used. It includes the language that is used. It includes who's at the table, who's the messenger, quote unquote, like who begins and leads the conversation. How do you build trust over time? And trust goes both ways. And this is this bit and piece about reciprocity as well. And you start at the human level, you start at that level. And that doesn't mean you dismiss the time that's required to work on also working to make systems more equitable and fair and representative. Like, and they feed into each other, they weave together. And that's the process. And you want it to be as inclusive as possible. And I oftentimes tell people, I'm gonna run over to where you are. But when we're done, I hope you're still not standing there. I hope we've moved forward together. And that's this journey that we are on together as human beings. And that's what the power goes to love too allows for us to do. And people like to think, well, love, that's kind of like, it's just like, it's squishy and sort of, so to speak, but like, it's also, it's human. So I oftentimes tell people, like, we're dealing with humans. And I've seen it work so many times. We're not dealing with machines. We're not dealing with robots. We're dealing with human beings. And people need hope. They need love. And that's how they move forward.
Thank you, Summer. I couldn't agree more. I don't think this is theoretical. I think it's really an emotional response. We're going to be joined by Jamal Sheets. I don't know, he might be on the line now. Magda, did you want to introduce the intervention that we're going to have now that's coming up?
Susan, thank you. No, we are, what we're doing here is to talk a little bit, Jamal and myself, but I'm going to let Jamal talk a bit. We are committed to start in the question about how do we start from the early education. I would say the ecology of the landscape for the future interventions. And Jamal and myself, we are committed to start a pretext program that introduces literacy and art literacy to early education. And this was, we're going to introduce that in the spring, but I think Jamal have a few important points to cover that, a few ideas, and very welcome in this.
Thank you, Magda. Thank you, Susan. And it's been such a pleasure to sit and to listen and to learn. And the whole time as you all have been in discussion about the different areas, the thing that comes to mind is how can we put this into practice? How can we begin to transform our communities? And so as Magda just stated, with the intervention that we're planning for the spring, which is pretext, it is an arts-based training program that teaches literacy, critical thinking. And so with that, we're taking text. We're taking, it could be a poem, it could be a book that could be intimidating, and tearing it up and deconstructing it and then reconstructing it into something else and making a new. And so we're going to start with the area schools in North Nashville. And we're going to start with, of course, me and Magda going through the training. And then we're going to work with our gallery ambassadors at Fisk and teach them the training and some of our core faculty. And then we're going to deploy it out into the community. And so that's one way, as you all have discussed, all of how there's not a silver bullet and all of the complex problems and ideas, and thinking about the quilting and the patchwork that T.S. Harvey had described, we're going to take one piece of that and start with the youth. And so this is one of many interventions that are going to take place in the fall, but we wanted to introduce it here because the conversation today has informed the decisions that we're going to make as we employ this in the future. So thank you.
Lovely. So we are now at 11:30, and I want to take this opportunity to, before we go to the to film, I just want to thank everyone so much once again. I'm sure all of our speakers so much. It was really a day that takes us from the theoretical into the concrete, an opportunity to really put all of this last 3 months into practice. Thank you again to Magda and Marina, and of course to today's special guests, professors. Thank you so much to Ted Fisher and to T.S. Harvey and to Summer Ali. So thank you so much.
So Susan, thank you, Susan, for your work as moderator today. And I want to say, Professor Harvey, Professor Fisher, Professor Ali, Professor Jamal Sheets, thank you all for being part of this love transmutation in this auspicious Wednesday. I want to thank Vanderbilt University, Susan Winter, dear John Gear, Dean Bonnie Dowd, the art department, our chancellor, of course, and everyone at Fisk University, at Fritz Museum, at Million of Conversation. I want to thank Marina Fokiri, who have worked diligently as program curator for the fall, and it will come back to us as a program curator for the spring. I want to ask now our entire technical group to bring their face out of the camera. Nisi from the Fritz Museum, please let us see you. Ellis from Million of Conversation, please let's see us. Mary, Megan, Barbara, award translator. And what I want to say about this program will not happen without the diligent work of every one of these individuals behind the camera. Lex is not with us this morning. Mark is not with us this morning. Cathy Delmes is not with us this morning. Kevin Murphy, Jane Landers, the Blair School of Music. But it is this group of people who really made possible that every Wednesday we come clean and clear to see you all, for you all to see our program. As we finalize today our fall semester in this really memorable year, this is our last gathering in 2020. And I can't wait to welcome all you back in 2021 for a continuation of living in common in the precarious South, starting January the 27th, I believe this is our first episode. And also with many of the faces behind the screen with us, and a continuum work with all this group that is our EADJ family. I am in profound gratitude for your trust, your care, and your dedication, every one of you. And I am in immense gratitude to the audience who have been with us, steady and returning and inviting new people. I want now to invite you to stay with us and to see a love transmutation from the city of Matanzas, a iconic group called Muñequitos de Matanzas, who came out of a working class people in the harbor of the city in a bar, and they play with very traditional instrument. And literally, this music will restore your soul and will invite you to dance. In just commenting very briefly, Susan's question about class and difference, and how do we invite the people that feel outside our reach. I believe in the personal testimony that difference could be bridged out by trust and by something that T.C. Harvey says so beautifully when his young son asked him where we find it. And he say, love is gold. Love is gold. See, we believe that we would manage to break down any obstacle for our proximity and our trust. We all are one thing, human, vulnerable, fragile, loving beings. Thank you and enjoy the music. In gratitude to you all.
Solito quisiera cantarte. alma enferma. Y temo tengo el alma enferma. Y temo. Apiádate de mi sufrir. Soy egoísta en mi dolor. Hoy te saludo, mañana quién sabe. Hoy te saludo, mañana quién sabe. Te brinde ternura y flores. Te brinde ternura y flores. Qué susto se llevó mi amiga cuando ella misma se enteró. Ay Dios, que Obata la le dio, la hizo meterse en la cocina detrás de un saco de carbón. Ay Dios, y en su entonación decía: te juro, baba cañeñe, número, pero baba cañeñe, pero baba cañeñe. Me juro, baba cañeñe, pero te juro, número bueno, pero baba cañeñe. Me juro, baba cañeñe, número, pero baba cañeñe, baba cañeñe. Me juro, baba cañeñe, la culpa no la tuvo nadie, la tuvo baba cañeñe. Me juro, baba cañeñe, aguaco, aguaco, no mire, baba cañeñe. Me juro, baba cañeñe, seguro caballero rumbero, pero baba cañeñe. Me juro, baba cañeñe, aguaco, aguaco de tiempo España, baba cañeñe. Me juro, baba cañeñe, esta rumba de los muñequitos, pero baba cañeñe. Me juro, baba cañeñe, pero baba cañeñe, pero baba cañeñe. Me juro, baba cañeñe. María la O, cuenta, cuenta, cuenta María. María la O, cuenta, 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 cuenta María. María la O, cuenta, María, pero cuenta, cuenta María. María la O, cuenta, María, ¿qué dice usted? María la O, cuenta, 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 cuenta María. María la O, cuenta, negra más linda tengo en Camagüey. María la O, cuenta, no pilaga, no pilaga, no pilaga. María la O, cuenta, María, María, María bonita. María la O, cuenta, aguaco, aguaco, cuenta María. María la O, cuenta, María, pero cuenta María. María la O, cuenta, María, pero cuenta María. María la O, cuenta, aguaco, pero cuenta María. María la O, cuenta, María, María, cuenta María. María la O, cuenta.
Bueno, sí, mi gente, estamos directamente en la agrupación Los Muñequitos de Matanza, tratando de estar un poco más cerca de sus casas con el programa Estamos Contigo, haciendo nuestra buena música, la rumba que ustedes conocen, ya que no podemos estar cerca de ustedes en los espacios habituados que ya ustedes conocen. Familia, estamos cerca de ustedes de esta forma, estamos contigo, Los Muñequitos de Matanza, para alertar de nuestra rumba matancera y cubana.
Amalia.
¡Qué fenómeno!
Todos dicen así. Amalia Dios te dio. Amalia, Amalia tiene un yayito, yayo Amalia, Amalia, Amalia tiene un yayito, yayo Amalia, 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 Amalia te llama. Amalia amigo pastor, pero Amalia tiene un yayito, yayo Amalia, Amalia, Amalia tiene un yayito, yayo Buya, 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 tiempo España. Caramba te está llamando. Amalia tiene un yayito, yayo Amalia, Amalia, Amalia tiene un yayito, yayo Amalia, Amalia, Amalia te llama. Amalia, oye mi abu. Amalia tiene un yayito, yayo pero Amalia, Amalia, Amalia tiene un yayito, yayo Amalia tiene un yayo. Amalia tiene un yayito. Amalia tiene un yayo. Amalia tiene un yayo. Amalia, Amalia tiene un yayito. Y ese yayito soy yo. Amalia tiene un yayo. Amalia, Amalia te llama pero Amalia tiene su vacilo. Amalia tiene un yayo. Amalia, 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 Amalia tiene su guaraní. Amalia tiene un yayo. Pero que guaguancó te está llamando. Amalia tiene su vacilo. Amalia tiene un yayo. Amalia tiene un yayito. Y ese yayito soy yo. Amalia tiene un yayo. Pero Amalia tiene un yayito. Y ese yayito soy yo. Amalia tiene un yayo. Pero la rumba me la llevo, caballero. Amalia tiene su vacilo. Amalia tiene un yayo. Yayito, y Amalia tiene su vacilo. Amalia tiene un yayo. ¡Rayo! Vele, 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 vana, 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 vana. Habana, habana, habana. Vele, 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 vele. Ana. Miro. Ana, 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 ana. Vele, 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 va. Oigan de nosotros el cantar maravilloso. Eleve, 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 eleva. Muy lleno de voces le brindamos, caballero, a todo en general, nuestro armonioso cantar. Hoy, espectadores, la dulce combinación con que se da. La clave, el golpe, el quinto y el tumbado. Oye, 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 mujer, 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 quisiera verte prendida, prendida de llama ardiendo, verte en la calle corriendo mientras te dure la vida, que sea triste y esparcida, que nada ni para nadie te conmueva en tu memoria, que si tú no mueres quemada, porque ese no es tu destino. Que la garra de una fiera haga tu liquidación, o que te coma un león, un lobo, una pantera. Vele, 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 vele.
Bueno, mi gente, este es para Cuba y para el mundo entero. Quédese en sus casas. Rumba desde aquí para tu casa.
Estamos contigo, el yerbero.
Vamos.
Vele, 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 va. Vele, 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 va. Vele, 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 va. Ah, na, 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 na. Llámalo. ¿Qué caballero tiene usted? Llámalo, llámalo. Llámalo, llámalo. Llámalo, llámalo. Yo soy el guerrero. Llámalo, llámalo. Yo soy el guerrero. Llámalo, llámalo. No aguanto los millares. Llámalo, llámalo. Mamita, yo soy el guerrero. Llámalo, llámalo. No aguanto el guerrero. Llámalo, llámalo. Yo soy el guerrero. Llámalo, llámalo. No aguanto número bueno. Llámalo, llámalo. Mamita, yo soy el guerrero. Llámalo, llámalo. 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 Llámalo, llámalo. Llámalo, llámalo. Para gozar un buen rumbo, calientico y sabroso. Tiembla la tierra. La tierra tiembla. Cuando hay matanzas se compra un rumbo. La tierra tiembla. Vecina su loro, no hace más que conversar. Vecina su loro, no hace más que tararear. Vecina su loro, no hace más que conversar. Vecina recoja el loro, porque lo voy a estropear. Vecina su loro, no hace más que conversar. Vecina su loro, no hace más que tararear. Vecina su loro, no hace más que conversar. No hace más que conversar, no hace más que tararear. Vecina su loro, no hace más que conversar. Vecina recoja el loro, porque lo voy a matar. Vecina su loro, no hace más que conversar. Vecina su loro, no hace más que tararear. Vecina su loro, no hace más que conversar. Olodo, 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 umbe, umbe, olodo yare. Olodo, 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 umbe, umbe, olodo yare. Olodo, olodo, sabroso. Olodo, umbe, umbe, olodo yare. Olodo, 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 Chile.